Okay, we're on 114 on the top, 212 at the bottom. We're middle of Perak Memal. Okay, brief recap. Alter Rebbe explains that the beginning of everything is fear. Why fear is bittul? Reishus Chachma Yiras Hashem. In order for Hashem to rest, there has to be humility. Hashem cannot rest on something which is full of itself. There's no room for Hashem. If the person's so full of themselves, so where's Hashem going? So therefore, a person needs to have Yid, which is bittul, and that's the first thing. And why? Because then he realizes everything he's doing, he's nothing, he's only connected to Hashem, and so on. The last thing we learned last week was, but you still need the level of love. Why? Because the bird needs two wings. The bird can't fly. You have the body of the bird, which is the mitzvah, but then you have to elevate the mitzvah upwards. So you need fear, which is primary, and ava, which is the second wing. Okay? And Alter Rebbe was explaining, even if you have this, the love and fear that gets you to do the mitzvah is also enough, and so on. And now the Alter Rebbe adds another dimension. So we're like 10 lines in the top of the page. Yet, but the rabbi said, Al Yetzi Od La'elam, Al Yetzi Atzmi Min HaKlal. The Gemara says about different things. A person should not separate himself from the community. In other words, Alter Rebbe is going to use this. Normally it says if the community is doing something, don't, do something else. Here the Alter Rebbe is explaining it in a little different way. Here the Alter Rebbe is explaining that when a person does a mitzvah, it's not for themselves. It's for Klal Yisrael. It's for all Jews. And therefore he says what you're intending to do with the mitzvah is not only for ourselves, it's for the Klal. And he says, Lochein, Yiskavim, when a person does a mitzvah. And again, the kavanah is the love and the fear, the intent, and so on. What he's thinking is to connect Maka nafshi or the kiss, the source of his nefesh, Maka nefesh is Kol Yisrael, and the source of all neshamas. Shuruach piv yisbarich, which is the spirit of God's mouth that blew the neshama into us. Hanikra b'shem shchina, which that level of godliness is called the shchina. Why? Because shchina comes from the word sheshechenes, it rests. Umistabeshes and dresses itself. Teich kol almin into the worlds, lachayesam ulakaimim to make him live and to make him exist. In other words, Alter Rebbe is saying that, in fact, this explains there's a fundamental halacha in Gemara and Shulchan Aruch that's called all Jews are responsible one for another. And based on what Alter Rebbe is saying here, we can understand that concept as Chassidus explains it in many different places. All Jews are responsible one for another. Okay, the 40th year of the Midbar, right before they went to Yisrael, the Jews became obligated one for another. That means I'm not only obligated for me to do my mitzvahs, I have an obligation halachically to make sure you do your mitzvahs. It's a halachic obligation, which explains a very basic halacha that we take for granted. If somebody heard shofar already, okay, can I go blow shofar for somebody in the street or in somebody's house, in the hospital? The question, if you think about it, really not. Why? You have to hear shofar from somebody who's obligated in the mitzvah. If you're like Marshall, a kid can't blow shofar for an adult. Women who are not biblically, nowadays they accept it upon themselves. Women that are biblically not obligated in blowing shofar cannot blow shofar for men. Why? Because you have to hear it from somebody who's obligated in the mitzvah. If you're not obligated, you can't fulfill somebody else's obligation. So the question is, halachically, if I already heard shofar, I'm not obligated anymore. If I'm not obligated anymore, how am I allowed to blow shofar for you? You're hearing from somebody who's not obligated. So Shulchan Aruch says that Kol Yisrael Adeidim Zebazeh, all Jews are responsible one for another. Therefore, I have an obligation that you hear shofar. I have an obligation that you hear shofar. And therefore, I am still obligated in the mitzvah of shofar. And therefore, I could blow for somebody that didn't hear yet, even though I heard it. But why is that? In a deeper sense, why is that halach? So Chassidus explains the word Kol Yisrael Arevim, Zeh Bazeh, the word Arev, which is the root, Aleph Reish Beis, has three meanings. Simply, Arev is a guarantor. But an Arev, in Arev Kabbalah and Arev, different levels of a guarantor. On a loan, you have a guarantor for the loan. Then Arev means sweet. It's called Arev, they have a very sweet voice. And the third meaning of Arev is Ta'aruves, a mixture. Ta'aruves, the root of Ta'aruves is Arev, which means a mixture. So here the Alter Rebbe explains the concept that all Jews are really one. In other words, if you have an obligation, so do I, because I'm one with you. We're all the same. That is the concept of Arevim Zebazeh. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe is explaining that the person is not only doing it for himself, he's doing this to connect all Jews with the source of their neshama, which is called Shechina, the divine presence. And he says, this is what sustains the koyach hadibur hazeh. This power when a guy learns Torah, they do a mitzvah, they daven, they learn, their hands are doing a mitzvah. Or koyach ha'maisa zeh mitzvah. What's causing that to happen? Who's giving me the koyach to talk or to do action? That's the power of Hashem in me. And that power of Hashem is equal by all Jews. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe is saying, when a Jew does a mitzvah, it's not, or he's going to explain it in a minute, we'll explain it even easier to understand. I'm not only doing a mitzvah for myself. I have to have in mind that the purpose of my mitzvah, doing my mitzvah, is to bring down the Shechina to every single Jew. Because where am I getting the power to do the mitzvah? From the word of Hashem, the Shechina that's resting in me, giving me the power to do the mitzvah. So that aspect is it, and therefore, the Yichud Zeh, how do you accomplish this unity between Hashem and all Jews? By bringing godliness down here. By occupying yourself in Torah and mitzvahs, which is melubish b'hem, which the godliness is in it, the yiskaven, therefore, lahamshich erda yisborech. What your kavanah, your intent is to bring down the revelation of godliness. Amarka nafshe, on his source of his nefesh, the nefesh is called Beis Yisrael liyachton, to unite them. Like it says later on, Barichas Alter Rebbe is going to explain this later on in time. Okay, so now the Alter Rebbe is going to say one more line. I'm going to explain this. He's not done yet. In other nuschos, Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Sfard, before a Jew does a mitzvah, they say l'shem yichud kudsho b'yichud. If you see another sidurim, if you ever in shul, before people are putting on towers of tefillin, they say l'shem yichud kudsho b'yichud shchintai, to unite HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the Shechina, Hashem with the Shechina, l'yachta b'yichud shlim, to unite with the complete unity of Kadosh Baruch Hu and Shechina, b'shem Kol Yisrael, for all Jews. Chabad doesn't do it. And what I'm going to explain will explain why Chabad doesn't. It's funny when people say things in davening and there's such depth to it, and we just take it superficially, and superficially it's very difficult to understand. When this expression goes l'shem yichud, which means we're doing this for the sake of uniting, kutshubrichu, which is Hashem, ushchintei, and his shchina, which is seemingly also Hashem, b'yichud shalem, with a complete yichud, the complete unity for all Jews. Now, what does this mean when you're uniting Kodesh Baruch Hu and Shechina? You're saying, I'm uniting Kodesh Baruch Hu, which is Hashem, and Shechina, the divine presence, with Hashem. What do you mean I'm uniting Hashem and Hashem? What's going on over here? So Chassidus explains, it's very profound, but it's very fundamental to know. The purpose of mitzvahs is to reveal godliness in the world. That's the purpose of doing mitzvahs, revealing godliness into the world. Now, normally, to give you a physical example, you can have men, you can have women, okay? Men alone and women alone cannot produce children. There has to be a unity between male and female, and then when there's a unity between male and female, then you produce children. By themselves, they're wonderful. They're men, women, but they can't produce. Because in order to produce in the physical world, you have to unite two things. When you unite two things, then you could produce. Why is it like that in the physical world? Because in the spiritual realm of godliness, that's what it's all about. Meaning like this. We know in the names of Hashem, if you look at the Kabbalah pictures, whatever, there's masculine, there's feminine. Okay? Chochmah is masculine, Bina is feminine. Chesed is masculine, Gvura is feminine. And all around the spheres, there's masculine and feminine. There's Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah is masculine, Bina is feminine. What happens, Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, when there's a unity between Chochmah and Bina, they're called father and mother. When there's a unity between Chochmah and Bina, you create midas. That's what Alter Rebbe says. Chochmah and Bina, intellect stimulates emotions. How do you stimulate emotions? There has to be a unity between Chochmah and Bina, between the male and female. Then what does that produce? Vav and Hey, male sons, and Hey is female daughters. Because Yud in Hebrew is masculine, the letter Yud is masculine, Hey in Hebrew is feminine. So you have Yud as Chochmah Bina, masculine and feminine, and that creates boy and girl. Vav is an extension of a Yud, which is again masculine in Hebrew. Vav is masculine. Hey is feminine. So therefore, when you have a yichud between Chochmah and Bina, you produce children. What are the children? The 6 fetus, which is called Zah, Ze'er Ampin, and Malchus, which is the daughter, otherwise the feminine. Now, Chassidus and Kabbalah explain the 6 fetus, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod Yesod, which is the son, the Vav, the 6, that is called Kodesh Baruch Hu. Kodesh means it's removed. The 6 fetus don't come down into the next world. They remain in the world of Atzilus, let's say. What level of Atzilus goes into the next world of Bria? Which level of Bria goes into Yetzirah? Which level of Yetzirah goes into Asiyah? Which level of godliness created the world? That's the level of Malchus, which is called Shechina. Now, the Rebbe is saying over here, why is it called Shechina? Because Shechina means it goes from one world to the next. It rests into the lower level. That's Shechina. Kodesh Baruch Hu is the 6 spheres of Atzilus, and each world has so accordingly. But let's speak about Atzilus. Kodesh Baruch Hu are the 6 spheres of Atzilus. They're called Kodesh Baruch Hu because they're removed. They don't go into the next world. Shechina is going into the next world. Now, when you have father separate, mother separate, son separate, daughter separate, you're not going to produce children. You're not going to produce more revelations than there are already. Because it's by itself. And the reason why it's like that in the physical, because it's like that in the spiritual realm. That means like this. There's a normal level of godliness which is revealed in the world, period. When we do a mitzvah, we want to reveal a greater level of godliness in the world. How do we reveal this greater level of godliness in the world? By causing a unity of godliness. That's what causes production, producing more revelations of Elokus. So what happens when a person does a mitzvah? Like the Rebbe says here, what are we uniting? Kodesh Baruch Hu, the higher levels, and the level of Shechina, which is the world that goes into the level that goes into the next world, down here, giving us the power and strength to do things. So when a Jew does a mitzvah, what in essence are they accomplishing? The shame we are doing this mitzvah, to have the yichud, the unity between the removed levels, Kodesh Baruch Hu, the 6 spheres of Zohar, and Shechinta, which is Malchus, which goes into the next world. The yichud shlim with an ultimate unity, the shame call yourself basically for the sake of all Jews. That's why people say the Shem Yichud before they do a mitzvah. If they don't learn Chassidus in Kabbalah, they don't know this concept. They just say it because that's what the Chassidus has to say. But the concept of Shem Yichud Kushabrichush, what we're actually doing is we are saying before doing the mitzvah, we are saying what we are accomplishing with the mitzvah. We should be aware of what we're accomplishing. Like Dr. Rebbe says here, you're bringing down Kedusha into the entire world for all Jews. Now, why doesn't Chabad say it? We only say it once a day before Baruch Sha'amad. So Chassidus explains it out, the Rebbe Rashab explains it, Tzemach Tzavach, and others explain many, many places. And to preface it with a story, Siddham of the Tzemach Tzedek once went to the Kotzker Rebbe. Kotzker Rebbe was the Rebbe before the founder of the Gerer Chassidim movement. And the Kotzker Rebbe was very close to the Tzemach Tzedek. He was very sharp, but he was very close to the Tzemach Tzedek. He asked the Tzemach Tzedek's Chassidim, how do you guys define a bracha? How does Chassidus define Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Ha'olam? How do you guys define it? So the Chassidim answered him as follows. Baruch means blessed, but Baruch, we learned many times, means to bring down. By Yavrech, she lowered the camels. Amavrech Segav means you lower when you kneel, by the way, you're lowering Berkaim, it's the knees. You're lowering your body. Amavrech Segav, Chassidus says, in the Mishming, says, you're taking a vine and putting it into wheat, which is forbidden, the mitzvah of the Rambam these days. So Baruch means to bring down. What are we bringing down? Ata. Ata is you, the essence of God. What are we doing? What are we accomplishing? Hashem. What is Hashem? Hashem represents the supernatural level of godliness. Yud Kei Vav Kei means Mahava. Yud Kei Vav Kei is the switch around the letters. You have Haya, Hoveh, and Yihiyah. Past, present, and future simultaneously. Yud Kei Vav Kei means creator. So obviously it's above creation. The infinite level of Hashem. The level of God that doesn't come into the worlds. It remains above it. And then we say Elokeinu. Now, what are we saying next? That this level of Ata, which is the essence of Hashem, should come down. For what purpose? For Hashem to become Elokeinu. There should be a unity between the infinite, Kadosh Baruch Hu, and Elokeinu, ours, that comes down to us. That's the level of Shechina. And then through this, Melech HaElam, he becomes a king over the world. It goes to the whole world. So the Kotzker said to them, now I understand why you guys don't say L'Shem Yichud Kudshabrichu. Because when you make a bracha, that's exactly what you're saying. You're saying that what is the purpose of this mitzvah? To cause a unity between the Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is the level of godliness that doesn't come down into the world, it remains above, into the level of Shechina, which is a level now of coming into the world. So there's a unity now which can produce children, meaning greater revelations of Hashem. And through that, it goes Melech HaElam into the whole world. Why do we say Ata? I mean, it's not relevant to this point, but Stam, because how can you combine infinite and finite simultaneously? Havaya Yud Vavke is infinite. Elokeinu is nature, Hateva, which is limited. How can you combine infinite with finite together? So that's where Ata is the essence of Hashem. The essence of Hashem is above everything. So the essence of Hashem can combine Havaya and Elokeinu, infinite and finite. And this is what Alter Rebbe said. V'zeu pirush l'shem yuchad kusha birchu shchinte, l'shem kol Yisrael. And this is what we do when we do a mitzvah. We reveal a level of godliness into the world that's unbelievable. But what are we saying? Melech HaElam, b'shem kol Yisrael. Alter Rebbe said it's very important though, when a Jew does a mitzvah, he has to understand that we're not doing it for ourselves only. We are also bringing down godliness into the world at large. Obviously, the person that does it gets first right, so to speak. They get a greater revelation. They're the ones doing it. But nevertheless, with the Alter Rebbe saying that's what we need to do. And he says, and this, and although in order that this kavanah should be real by him, for a person to really want this unity, to really, want godliness in the world, and they feel the lack of godliness into the world, the only way you can bring down godliness in the world, if world doesn't mean anything to you. All the temptations of the world, all the things going on in the world, what should be your Ava Rabba, this tremendously great love? But what should it be? Only La Hashem Levade. Nachas Ruach Lefanav Levad. And he says even a deeper level. Not to quench the thirst of my neshama. He says because the purpose is Nachas Ruach Lefanav. If we learned to Monday night at the Chumash class, the Korban is Nachas Ruach Lefanai. The Korban brings the pleasure that we're doing it because God, and not to quench your thirst. Now the Rebbe is saying it in the same line. He's saying as follows. If a person does a mitzvah, that he should become closer to Hashem, there's a you in there. There's a you in. I'm becoming closer to Hashem. I love Hashem. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Yesh mi shev. There's a guy that loves. It's not bittul. Last time we were explaining, Yira is bittul. Fear is bittul. Ava is I love. There's a me that loves. The Alter Rebbe says the ultimate yichud, when a Jew does a mitzvah, what should be, again, this is where the bittul comes in, the yira, not so much the ava. And Alter Rebbe says, why are you doing it, the mitzvah? He says, Lasis nachas roch lefanav levat, because this is what Hashem wants. This is what Hashem wants. And not to connect himself to Hashem. And like he says, just in these few lines, like a child who does for the sake, not nowadays, children used to do for the sake of the parents, more than they would do for themselves. Why? Because this is what the parents want. They're not doing it for themselves. Why are they going out of the way for the parents? Because this is what the parents want and need. It's not for me. Now, the Rebbe is saying, ultimately, the purpose of Torah mitzvahs is to bring down godliness, not because it's for me. On the contrary, I'm doing it for the whole Klal Yisrael. And the ultimate reason is because this is what Hashem wants. And that's why we'll just finish with this point. Why are korbanos called lachmi, my bread? Because korban lachmi leishai. In this week's parsha, Hashem says the korbanos said my bread. What do you mean Hashem bread? What is the purpose of eating food? To keep the neshama in the body. God forbid you don't eat. The neshama is going to leave the body. What does food do? It keeps the neshama in the body. And that's why when you don't eat, you feel weaker. Because the neshama is not in the body so much. What does a mitzvah accomplish? That Hashem wants to be in the world. He wants to be bringing them down. He wants to be here. That's why korbanos are called the food of the bread of Hashem, the food of Hashem. So just like food keeps the neshama in the body, korbanos, Torah mitzvahs, what does it say? What is the good smell that Hashem has from the korbanos? Not good smell of the physical hides burning, which are awful. What it means is the flesh and blood, the hides don't burn. The flesh and blood, what is it? Hashem did what we did what he wanted us to do. Not for me, for him. Okay, we're going to leave it here. Mitzvah Monday night will be a Parsha class. Everybody have a great Shabbos. You should only hear good news all over the place.